Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to read you a story that I wrote when I was in high school. This is The Sparrow, the Crow, and the Dove, written and illustrated by Linnea Stevens. Once there was a small and carefree sparrow. She loved to fly above the clouds and sing with her friends. She had no worries, except that she had a hole in her chest, right in her heart. She had always had it, but didn't know why it was there. She tried to see if different stones, nuts, and seeds would fill it, but nothing fit quite right. She wondered if she would ever be able to fill it. One day, Crow flew to the branch she was sitting on. He stood tall and elegant with shiny black feathers. He chatted with Sparrow and made her laugh. She grew to love him and trust him. She wondered, maybe he knew what would fill the hole in her heart. Without warning, Crow gave her a single sharp peck. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Oh, that's just my way of showing that I like you," he replied. Sparrow felt uneasy, but decided she wouldn't worry about it. She really did like Crow and wanted him to love her. Crow, however, was not to be trusted. Soon he attacked Sparrow, striking her, tearing her wings with his claws, and pecking her with his sharp beak. Sparrow was scared and confused. Why would he do this to her? She thought he cared about her. Crow left Sparrow lame and threw her in a cage, closing it with a rusty lock. Her feathers tattered and her wings bleeding. Sparrow huddled on the floor of her cage and wept. Not only had Crow not filled the hole in her heart, now he had left even more holes in her. The longer Sparrow stayed in the rusty cage, the blacker her feathers turned. She longed for the days before she had been hurt. She wished she could go back to when she was carefree and happy. She turned bitter, and her despair grew day after day. Worst of all, the hole in her heart was still painfully empty. She saw other birds flying outside the cage, and none of them understood why she was in there. Others asked why she couldn't get out herself. It seemed like some of them didn't even care. Crow mocked her and told her it was her fault she was in the cage. After all, he said, how could she have been so blind and trusted him? Alone and miserable, she began to believe his words. One day a new bird came. He was Dove. He stood taller than Crow, and his feathers were milky white, and his black eyes gleamed with kindness. He approached Crow and said, "Let Sparrow go." "Why should I?" Crow sneered. "She belongs to me, and besides, she is worth nothing." "Not to me, she isn't," Dove cooed deeply. Crow thought a moment and said, "What will you pay me for her?" Dove whispered something that Sparrow did not hear. Crow smiled nastily, then pounced on Dove. Crow flew around Dove, digging his talons into his flesh, pecking him and tearing his feathers, much worse even than Sparrow's. Crow threw Dove in a tiny cage and locked it tight. Dove lay motionless in an unrecognizable heap. Sparrow cried. How could he help her now? Before her eyes, Dove's wounds healed themselves. He burst from his cage, shining in a haze of blinding light. Crow, terrified, squawked and flew away in a frenzy. Dove held a key made of shining silver in his claws and unlocked Sparrow's cage. "Sparrow," he said, "I have set you free." Confused, Sparrow asked, "Why are you saving me? It's my fault that I'm in here." "Why would you say that?" Dove asked kindly. "Because I was foolish to trust Crow. I should have known better." "No," Dove said, "nothing is your fault. It was Crow who hurt you. Even if you have known what he was going to do, he was bigger and stronger than you, and you couldn't have done anything to stop it." Sparrow let Dove's words sink in. She had done nothing wrong. It wasn't her fault. Still, Sparrow hesitated. Could she trust Dove? The last time she had given her heart to someone, she had been hurt so deeply. Then she remembered all that Dove had gone through, how he had suffered at Crow's claws, even more than her. She asked Dove, "Why did you save me? Why did you let Crow torture you for my sake?" Dove's eyes shone with tears, and he simply replied, "Because I love you." Yes, she could trust him. As she stepped from her cage, she noticed that Dove still bled from his wings, his side, and his feet. He held one of his wings over her head. As the blood dripped onto her body, her black feathers turned to brown again, and her wounds were healed. Best of all, at last, the hole in her heart was filled. Overjoyed, Sparrow flew into Dove's chest, and he folded his vast wings around her. She was happier, freer than she had ever been, even before Crow had wounded her. Suddenly, she looked up. "Will Crow come back?" she asked. Dove's eyes looked at her tenderly as he said, "Yes, there will be times when he will come back to haunt you, but I will protect you. I will shield you from his shouted insults and whisper my love in your ear. He will accuse you, but I will remind you of who you really are. He will try to strike you, but my wings will cover you. Trust me, you do not need to be afraid." "Thank you," Sparrow cried. Then she noticed that Dove did not bleed anymore. She touched the holes in his wings, marveling at what he had done for her. The two of them flew off together into the clouds, singing happily and basking in the sunlight. But it was nothing compared to the brightness of the joy that Sparrow felt in her heart. The end.